Hey, hello and welcome. Welcome to Winnipeg. My name is Joel Templeman and I am the Executive Director of the Internet Society Manitoba chapter. Joining me today is Shelley Anderson, the Community Facilitator and Acting Project Coordinator for Indigenous Vision for the North End. We are here to talk to you about the North End Connect project. This is a short talk, so we will hope that it piques your interest and you reach out to find out more. And I'd like to thank the organizers of ICS for having us here today. Next slide, please. The Manitoba chapter of the Internet Society was formed in 2020 with the goal of advocating for and supporting the efforts to improve the quantity, quality, and accessibility of internet connectivity. There is no cost to join the chapter as an individual. We are looking for people who are interested in participating and helping us to solve the problems with the existing connectivity model. We are also looking for partners and sponsors to build our financial base so that we can do more. This presentation is an overview of a multi-year project to address the lack of affordable and accessible internet connectivity in the north end of Winnipeg. The project is currently in the research phase, which includes knowledge mobilization through presentations like this one. This is a community-based participatory action research focus, and it is critical that the residents and the local community-based organizations are aware of and involved in this effort. We hope that after hearing this presentation that you will become involved, pass on the message, and even support us directly to help us achieve our goals.
Hi, so a little bit about Indigenous Vision for the North End. It was previously Aboriginal Vision for the North End. We are a coalition of 11 community-based nonprofit organizations. We connect and support our 11 organizations and all other community organizations in the North End. IVNI is community-led. The four main pillars of IVNI are culture, connecting, convening, relationship building, and community actualization. So what does that look like? IVNI has a lot of our own programming, the North End Connect project, the Make It Work Fund, which fills in the gaps of employment. And we also have our own community events that we hold in the North End, which is Smudge the North End, and we held our first IVNI block party.
Next slide.
This is for the computer.
You just talk about the computer, you're aware.
So through the North End Connect project, we have our community computer program. That's a partnership with Computers for School Manitoba. They give us refurbished desktop computers to distribute to North End residents. That's the only requirement that they have to be a North End resident. So far, we've given out 65 computers, and we've heard positive impacts from the community, it helping them in their schooling, their kids, and homework, and yeah.
That's all. You're doing good. Next slide. The research portion of the project is a partnership and supported by the Manitoba Research Alliance and the University of Winnipeg. Specifically the Institute of Urban Studies. The Institute of Urban Studies has a campus of the University of Winnipeg right in the North End on Selkirk Avenue. So they have been working with us on this since the very beginning. The importance, I mentioned it earlier, but the importance about this too is that right from the very beginning, right from the way that we've been doing the research itself, all the way through the project, we have a set of ideals that we are trying to stick to, and we're trying to demonstrate that right from the beginning. So the community-based research means that we are not coming from the outside and imposing ourselves in the community. We were invited in from the community in the first place. One of the community-based organizations early in the pandemic who work in the education field were looking for support. And I don't have to tell this room about the problems that we experienced with connectivity, but those were felt very significantly in the North End when the kids were sent home to learn from home. The lack of connectivity and the lack of devices was felt immediately. So we were brought in to have that discussion. Little was done, to be real. Some Band-Aid solutions were put in place. We helped connect them with some resources that were available. There wasn't much to do, but what it did do was spark a much larger discussion about why we're in this position in the first place, and especially in the North End. So the research question is basically trying to identify why the current solutions don't work or aren't working in this area, and what we would need to do to fill that gap. So that community-based portion of this, being in the community and being led by community, is throughout the research and the project. The other part is participatory action research is a little bit different than kind of classic research, in the sense that we're not just finding a problem, looking at the problem and doing a big analysis on it and saying, there's your problem, and putting it down and saying, what's the next problem? Action research is designed specifically to make a change. So the research is intended to inform us about what options are available and what best fits there are to drive action. So that it's a process where as we're working and we go into the actual build phases, the research will continue on as well and help guide us right from the beginning to the end. Next slide, please. So for those of you who do know Winnipeg, we're specifically talking about the postal code prefix R2W. So basically from McGregor to the west, Inkster to the north, the Red River to the east, and the tracks to the south. If you don't know Winnipeg, none of those things will matter, but this is where we're basically focusing our effort. The research is focused in that area, and this is where we're starting from. The North End itself is larger and doesn't really have clearly defined borders, but as far as the research project and what we're starting with, that's our target area. Next slide, please. So the goal of the research is to identify and validate the problem. We don't think that's going to be hard for us to validate the problem. We all know that there is one, but there isn't a lot of academic research in Canada, and definitely not in Manitoba. So this is laying the basis of the beginning of academic work in this area, in this province. And to identify the primary root causes, affordability, accessibility, availability, those types of things, and really kind of define that in the terms from those in the neighborhood. We're actually, we hired, and like I said, right from the beginning, we're trying to use these ideals. So we hired 2 Indigenous women from the neighborhood to be our research assistants. They're not students, they just were available and know the community, live in the community. So we've done 30, almost 40 interviews right now with people from the community through the organizations that IBNI is part of. And we have another 5 or 6 or so. And we're also working with newcomer organizations in the neighborhood as well. So trying to get as much on the ground feedback from those groups to be able to guide us in the next phases. Okay, next slide, please. This is the research team. It's slightly different than the overall project team. This being community-based research project, it's including and bringing together existing resources with trusted track records within the community to accomplish much of the on-the-ground activities. So like I said, we were invited in, and we have been very careful about building and honoring that trust that's been given to us. So we are making sure that we are operating through the existing programs and the existing organizations that are there, because they already have those relationships. Next slide, please. If you haven't had a chance to check out this book, it's quite new. It's awesome. I would highly recommend it. The project is taking on a mixed methodology approach in highlighting the problem and looking for new models. So one of the things that you'll see in this is that we are not trying to just take an existing model and plunk it into the neighborhood and just hope that it works, right? We are really trying to take a really critical look at the existing models and the alternative models that are there and finding one that works in this situation. Next slide, please. So a shout out to CIRA, Canadian Internet Registration Authority. You probably know this, but they have a performance test that is awesome, and we have just finished making a deal with them to have access to that data. So there's very little quantitative data that we have access to, but as far as identifying the problem, the performance test is one of those things that will give us some actual numbers that we can crunch. And so what we're doing, if you are from Winnipeg, run the test, tell your friends, run the test. It doesn't matter if you're in the North End or not, but we just want to have as much and as current data as we can to be able to look at when we're doing the study. What we expect out of this, and it shouldn't be any shock to anybody here, is that we'll find somewhat of a correlation between income levels and accessibility. That shouldn't be shocking. But we don't have that quantified here. We don't have that in the province. So again, like I said, this is not just this project for the North End, but it's the beginning of an academic base of knowledge that other researchers can build on here. And then from that, we can work on advocacy and pushing for change. Next slide, please. One of the things that we did that might be cool, this is kind of the geeky side of it. We worked at Computers for Schools. They have interns who work for them that do the work. They have a work program. And one of the interns had a little bit of knowledge in programming. So we kind of hired him on the side to do a project for us. And it was to write a script to put onto the computers we're giving away that runs the CIRA performance test in the background. So when you first boot up the computer, they have a window that comes up that gives them informed consent. They can read through it. It explains what it is, and if they don't want to do it, they can turn it off. But if they don't, then it opens up a browser in the background and visible to the user, and on a random every couple of weeks schedule, it will fire the mini. If you don't know, they have a mini page, which is just that one button that runs the test. So it basically fires the test. So they're contributing to the data collection through the computers we're giving away. So, but at the same time, the part that's important about it is the entire project is committed to open source everything that we're doing. So all of the code that was written that we paid for is on GitHub. If you want to run the CIRA test in the script, fill your boots. It's there for anybody to use, modify to contribute to, and we'll continue to do that with all of our educational resources, all of our documentation, and all of our technical information. Is that we'll make anything that we can open source and available. So that's one of the first examples of us doing that. Next slide, please.
So a little bit about our North End Connect logo. We commissioned it to a renowned local Indigenous artist, Letitia Spence, to create a meaningful symbol to represent the project. The logo utilizes imagery from the bell tower. If you're not familiar, it's on Selkirk Avenue, and powers a huge part of where community meets. The star blanket represents Sky Woman's agreement with Grandmother Spider to come down and live upon the earth. They are often gifted to people to honor that person, show respect and admiration, and are a tradition built on generosity. The color palette is rich with deeper purples and a golden yellow to provide that contrast, highlighting the tower and the tips of the star blanket. The bell, now in the Selkirk Tower, was first purchased in 1877 and served in Winnipeg's Old Market Square and City Hall, nicknamed the Gingerbread House for its unique style. For over 2 decades, it rang at noontime 15 times before stores closed and 15 minutes before school started. There were also special occasions, such as when the funeral corteges of prominent citizens passed City Hall on the way to or from the train station, and when political figures died. The bell served as the first form of wireless communication in the city as an important icon in its new home in the North End.
I put that line into this presentation, and I've done it a few times now, and I've given it to non-technical crowds. So the fact that the bell was the first wireless communication, anybody? Just me then. It's a bit of a stretch, but give it to me, come on. Okay, next slide, please. So this, the purpose of the project is to identify the needs of the community and implement technical solutions appropriate to support and strengthen existing opportunities in the North End. So we've taken really an asset-based community development look at this, right? So we're not coming into the neighborhood and looking at all the negatives. We are looking at all the positives, right? The one thing that if you are from Winnipeg and you know the North End, is that it is a very strong community, despite the cards that are dealt in that area and have been since the development of that area. The community organizations and the people who are involved in the community are very strong and close-knit. And it has been a pleasure to work on the project because of the way that we're doing it, as having them implement it themselves, right? So that strength is something that we are piggybacking on and allowing them to grow. At the end of this, the idea is that any of the partners that we're bringing in that are helping with this will at some point remove ourselves from the project, and they will be self-sustaining. So this is not something that we're bringing in and staying with. This is something that we're coming in to bring the funding and the project management and the technical support, and working with community groups that already exist. So that has been a lengthier process, but well worth the time, and it is a longer, more sustainable model. So next slide, please. So this is actually a document that just came out. This was published recently by Connect Humanity, and I'm not putting it in here just because I'm kissing up to the hosts. This is actually, if you haven't had a chance to read this document, it's financing mechanisms for locally owned internet infrastructure. If you could find a more boring title, I don't know how. But trust me, take a read. It is actually a really good document. It's very much needed for people like me. I have a whole pile of different resources that in my brain all make sense, and I actually thought to myself, we really should, put these into some kind of a cohesive document, and this is basically it, right? It's really well done. So thank you for doing that. And the couple of points that we are really taking out of this, and it really kind of supports what our ideas were, is that this is a different mindset. This project isn't just taking something that exists and doing it. It's really changing the discussion, changing the argument, and changing the product, right? So a couple of things that I pulled out of the report that I like. The digital divide is not a problem that the market alone can solve, right? So this is not we're not trying to be in competition with the market. We're not trying to be in competition with anyone. This is trying to finish that little bit. And I did like the part where they said that change the conversation that the second half of humanity won't be connected the same way as the first half. So, kudos to everything that we've done up until now, but we're working in the space where chronic problems and market solutions are unlikely going to work, right? So it's a different model, it's something else. So if it could have been solved the way we're doing it now, it would have already been done. Right? So this is obviously an area that needs some new thinking, some new resources. So that we also, the one thing about this that's been lacking a long time is the financial part, right? So this document goes a long way to start looking at different ways to finance these things, and also how we don't even really have a conversation or the language for different results. Our metrics are almost always dollars, right? So where is the social capital? Where are the improvements to life? Where are the dollar values? So we have to really invent another way to value those things, value the savings, the money that we're not putting into healthcare and education, all those types of things. How do we figure out, how can we make that argument and change the way that we fund and the way that we talk about success in these types of projects? So this is a really good document. I would highly recommend checking it out. Next slide, please. So this is, again, this is a bit of a commentary about the privatization and the current model. But again, like I said, this is not competition. We're not saying that we want to replace the current model. We're saying that there are places, very much so in Canada, that the model doesn't work. So we need to have this conversation, and we need to do these experiments. We need to be allowed to have room to do these experiments, and we need to be supported while we try. Okay, and the things that work, we can replicate and share with others, and the things that don't work, well, at least we're trying, and at least we are exploring all the different options. Next slide, please. We have set ourselves fairly high goals. So we are looking at this not just as a connectivity project. This is not, once there's a box on the wall with blinky lights, we're not done, right? This is not about just the connection itself. So I like this. The Alliance for Affordable Internet has a really good definition of meaningful connectivity that we're looking at. So it's not just, are we physically connected? It involves the whole spectrum of, it's not really done until it impacts your life and improves your life, right? So it includes not just the right speed, but an adequate device. These are all very well chosen words. So yes, you can write a Word document on your phone, but how many of those would you do before your thumbs leave you and give up, right? So having an adequate device for what you need to do, having access to enough data, and that frequent connection, right? So checking your email once a week by walking down the block to go to the library to use the free computer is not a frequent connection. That's not, you couldn't run a business off that, right? That's not connected in our minds. So we're using the much kind of more sophisticated and much more difficult target of meaningful connectivity. And luckily there was already kind of a perfectly good breakdown of that. So we're using that definition. Next slide. We're also looking at, we're using the term digital inclusion, and this is a perfectly good breakdown of it. So we're using this as, so again, a harder model, as opposed to having, oh, if someone on your block has a computer, then that whole block is connected, or there's one computer in your household and there's 12 kids and 2 working parents. You know, we're looking at something where it's much more inclusive and looks at all of the aspects of the connectivity, not just the technology. So I pulled a couple of slides from Connect Humanity's document. What I liked about this was, first of all, it defines this entire space of the community connectivity provider. So even in its phrasing, it's a bigger term. It's not just an internet service provider. It's talking about kind of everything. It's a bigger catch-all, and I like that it's a new kind of phrase that we have overarching. So you would have, you know, the current kind of privatized model, and then you would have these community connectivity providers. It's a great envelope to put us in. Oh, sorry, next slide, please. There, tapping. And then what it does as well is it breaks it down into the 3 possible things. And what we did with this project, we kind of worked backwards. We looked at the social enterprises and looked at the descriptions, looked at the pros, looked at the cons, and it's not something that's really going to fit for us, right? It's a perfectly good model, but based on the research, based on the discussions with the groups, knowing what we have, knowing the political climate in the city and in the province, you know, all those factors that we've had to take into consideration, social enterprise is unlikely our avenue at this point. So that's good. We left that one alone. And municipal networks. There's lots of good examples of municipalities, you know, being kind of forward thinking and investing in infrastructure, working with different groups. And for a number of reasons, that's not really something that's immediate in this city or province. Hopefully, through this experiment, through this project, we'll start having that dialogue with the city and with the province, and they'll start seeing these types of things with the value, and that could change in the future. But right now, starting with a municipal style project is not something that we're looking at. So that leaves us with the farthest left category, which is the actual community network. All right, so very powerful. Community networks are owned by the local community of users, and any returns are invested into the community or returned to the members, right? So that fits our bill perfectly, right? Because we don't want any of the effort and funding that goes into this to then seep out of this community, this community needs all the dollars they can get and hold on to. So again, right from the research phase, the money that we had for, even when we hosted events, we had one of the community libraries a few weeks ago, we had an event. We had some of the computers from Computers for Schools that we were raffling off and giving to them. We were doing some of the research interviews in the basement. We had a hot dog truck come along, and we were giving food out to the neighborhood. All of that money that we spent on that was sourced in the neighborhood, right? Those were local businesses that we used. Any of the food that we did, we're trying at all costs to be able to keep that right from the very beginning. So it is a community. It is very much a community based effort, and then a community network works out perfectly for that. Next slide, please. So there are some benefits. It's more responsive, right? So this is very much involving the local community needs. It can connect areas where projects are not cost effective for municipalities or private investors. Okay, the entire neighborhood. This isn't just a connectivity issue. This is a problem for a lot of projects in the North End. So it fits that type of model. We have a high degree of local buy-in, right? That's one of the things that took so long and we didn't rush into was having those conversations, like going door to door and working with the community organizations and with other things too. Like we've participated in events that had nothing to do with connectivity. There's some of the great work that Indigenous Visions for the North End was already doing. We participated in, right? So it's not just a one-stop kind of a pop in, fix it, and then run away. This is a commitment to the community. So the community has those things, and those are our hopes: local jobs and training opportunities. The community keeps the proceeds, and that the network is self-administered, right? So there's some self-determination that can come from this, right? The neighborhood will eventually have a voice, and that's something very much that it wants. Next slide, please. Of course, there are some challenges with the model. Okay, the communities often lack the financial and technical capability to install, operate, and manage a network. That's absolutely true in this case. And it's something that we have looked at and want to build into the plan, right? So we're kind of doing this backwards, right? We're starting with some digital literacy training. We're starting with giving away computers, right? We're just getting more devices into the neighborhood, getting this conversation started. And then as we're going, more technical training, more work with the local high schools and the local groups that have youth that might be interested in this type of stuff, that kind of training as well, and then slowly bringing in a network that they can sustain. So this is not going to be scaled quickly or largely. It's intended to stay small. Offering free or low-cost services can compromise the financial viability of the project, rendering it perpetually dependent on grants and subsidies. Yes, so if anybody in the room has the financial whiz and wants to figure out how we're going to sustain this over time, this document has a lot of great models for that, but that is something that is going to be a huge challenge that we need to address. Keeping the costs low and reducing our risk is really our primary kind of strategy, but we still have to have some kind of a cash flow, so that is going to be a concern. Highly dependent on local participation and effective governance mechanisms. So that is a risk, but that's actually something that I'm not worried about. I think that the local groups are very used to this type of environment. So I think that this is just something that's going to be added in. And then enforcement for paying and things like that. So we haven't really even gotten into those types of models on how we're going to operate it, because again, we're not coming with a solution in hand. We're not coming in, kicking in the door saying, hey, we're here to help. Here you go, goodbye. Right? We're developing this right from scratch. And as much as possible, we aren't predetermined anything. So people are like, oh, are you using wireless? I'm like, sure. Like we don't have we are purposely trying to hold back on those types of decisions so that we don't paint ourselves into any kind of a corner. Next slide. So I think this is really, for us, out of the options that are available, the community network model fits for us, right? We fit into the low income area where connectivity isn't affordable, delivering services isn't profitable, for private or municipal operators, and the community supports the project and is willing to contribute non-financial resources or to pay for services. Okay, so that I couldn't have written that better in if I was to describe the project. That model is almost perfect for this particular situation. Next slide. So we are just starting to have technical discussions, and actually this conference comes at a perfect time in the phase. There are some people in the room who are out of town who we've been kind of engaging with, and we want to add to this. This team list needs to be 5 times longer. So if you're interested in this project at all, we're looking for that conversation. But as the research continues on, we are kind of starting to tiptoe into the technical discussions to see what those options are. And at some point, there's going to be a crossover where we look at the technical solutions and we look at all the research that we have been gathering, knowing what will and won't work. And then we can get into kind of pilot phases to try different technical solutions, right? So we're at that kind of phase now. Next slide, please. And as far as the chapter goes, I'll get a quick little plug for the Manitoba chapter. So we started this discussion probably in 2019, and then it kind of accelerated when the pandemic hit. The Manitoba chapter exists because there are many people in the province working in this space and doing really good work, but there was no real one body that was looking collectively at all of it. And the Internet Society is well recognized and has that support mechanism. So there is a Canada chapter and there is a chapter in Quebec. We had discussions with both of them, and this is a very big and diverse country. So we were actually one of the first chapters to form after they changed the rule that you could have multiple chapters in a country. So we're kind of very proud that we're up and running now, and we're at that phase right now that we're ready to take on more members, which is free if you want to join, and start doing more work for the whole province. So in addition to doing the North End Connect, which is 99.9% of our effort right now, we don't want to forget about the rest of the province and the connectivity issues that we have all over. So okay, well, that concludes our presentation.